Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Powerplay, between acts and scenes, a discussion on plays. Plays have been an integral part of literature, and today we will be having a discussion on that. Before that, let me introduce my panel to you for this evening. We have Abhinav Bhattacharya, my constant panelist, joining me from Bangalore. Also joining Abhinav Bhattacharya is Priyanka Adhikary, who also happens to be from Bangalore. And there's also my close friend and my ex-classmate, Anubhav Bhattacharya, who also happens to join from Bangalore. So it's a Bangalore-centric panel this evening, and let's begin. So I'll just now request my panelists to just come ahead and come in front and introduce themselves. We'll begin with Abhinav.
Hey, hi Akashdeep, and hello to Anubhav and Priyanka for joining in today. The pleasure is all mine for this, and looking forward for this, enormous yet engaging topic of power play.
Thank you. Priyanka, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hello, Akashdeep. Hello, and thanks for the invite. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm living in Bangalore since past 11 years, and I have done my graduation here. And my professional career also continues to be in Bangalore. And I'm originally from Guwahati, Assam, and I have done my schooling from Army School in Narengi.
That's great. Anubhav Bhattacharya, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I came to Bangalore around 2017 and started my own company here. And we have been I think working from home since 2017. But I mean, with the new normal, we are all indoors. Exactly. We are working from home for, I think, 90 days since my birthday. We've been in lockdown, right? So looking forward to this. And hi to everyone all the way from Bangalore.
Okay. As I had already mentioned, the topic for this discussion is plays and how it's an integral part of literature. Many of us have had plays in a school curriculum, and it's a big part of school curriculums across the globe. And that's how many people get introduced and acquainted to plays and theater. And so people like to read them, they like to watch them on stage, which forms an integral part of theater as well. And there have also been various adaptations of plays into movies, and they've also have this journey from the pages, from the books to the celluloid to the 70 screen. So that'll be the core topic of our discussion. And so let's begin. The first question that I'll throw out to you guys, the first question for you guys is, do you read plays, and what have you read so far, and do you really like reading them? Abhinav.
So plays define us, I would say, Akashdeep, and definitely most of the famous plays out there today is aimed at either uplifting or downgrading social dogma. And of course, I would like to mention the fact that almost around 90% of the traditional English readers, starting from a growth level in schooling days, or even when in an advanced stage or advanced phase in their own career, one have to read a Shakespeare, or does read a Shakespearean play, and that's where it has become a part of our lives, and it defines anything. Shakespeare today defines love, hate, comedy, tragedy. The list goes on. But even then, I would like to particularly mention Nikolai Gogol's The Government Inspector, which was a phenomenal play of all times. And this play is just like the Comedy of Errors, but a different version of it, and I would say more humane version of it. And this was something which it was set in a different world altogether from the Shakespearean days. So that's why Gogol's work, and Gogol found his way by satirizing human greed, strength, and sometimes even stupidity, and the extensive political corruption of imperial Russia back then. So that's why this play was quite integral part in terms of my reading and my thought process around plays.
Okay, so it's also leaning towards social commentary of sorts, if you like to put it.
Exactly.
Okay. Priyanka Adhikary, the question's for you now. Do you like reading plays, and what has been your interest or your journey with plays so far?
Yes, so plays have formed a vital part in my daily reading. So as it was habituated during my academic career, So I think most of us have knowingly or unknowingly passed the Shakespearean era of literary dominance. So yet I would
Yeah.
like to highlight that I have also been fortunate to be exposed to be to very niche plays which have really inspired me, like Hedda Gabler, which was written by Henrik Ibsen. It's a Norwegian playwright, and also Oscar Wilde, who's popularly known as a poet. And
Mm.
yet his play, The Importance of Being Earnest, has gained significant importance. And of course, to take a few names of the Shakespearean plays, which is like King Lear and Merchant of Venice, and also few of our native plays like Kohinoor and Bordeaux Syllab,
Mm.
etc.
Okay. Anubhav Bhattacharya, I'm tossing it over to you now.
Great. So I think the last play I read was As You Like It. So that was part of our ICSE course curriculum, as you all know, right? So
I
I
know.
think when I went back in November 2019, that's when I just went through it again. I mean, I remembered all those scribblings, the meanings that we wrote down there, the highlights that we did. So yeah, I mean, plays are indeed like very, like in a way they're complex as well as like it's fun to read. So yeah, looking forward to discussing more on that.
Okay. That takes me to the next question. What was the first play that you ever read in your life? And did it have an impact on your life in any way? Like any character, any incident, any plot, any subplot? Did it have an impact on your life? Or any dialogue for that matter, or dialogue or a monologue impact on your life? Abhinav, I'll start off with you.
Sure. So I would say, Akashdeep, the first play I read was The Seagull by Chekhov. The play has a very realistic view of the world, I would say. And the biggest factor I would like to mention is that, which is not much of a spoiler, is that a character in the play have dreams which never comes true. So that's
Yeah.
something which we can, most of us today can always, connect to or throughout the ages. So that's very realistic to me, and that's why I thought the seagull was quite true from a real world perspective as well. And the seagull, at times, it's a modern comedy, but there is also an almost unbearable tenderness to the play's portrayal of young love, hope, and
Mm.
idealism. And that's the impact which has on the reader, is to be realistic and embrace life as is. So that's my top pick for uh, the day in terms of the first read.
Okay. Priyanka, first play you ever read, impact it had on your life.
Uh,
Anything to share with us on that?
Yeah, so for me, I watched first and then I started reading. So the first play which I read was during my school days, which was The Tempest from Shakespeare. So, well, like back then, I really liked the execution, how the characters unfolded, but eventually I delved more into the world of plays, I think. So, the play which has inspired me was Hedda Gabler, and it has rather impacted my way of looking at life and what you make out of it. So the
Yeah.
play's genre, which is naturalism, so that actually leads a creation of illusionary characters of reality, and then it actually brings you back, and it's like a partial return to the social stigma. So I think that was one of very prominent plays which I have has touched my heart basically.
Anubhav Bhattacharya, the song remains the same. Sorry, the question remains the same.
Sure. So I think like through school mostly, I was equated with a lot of William Shakespeare back then. So
Yeah.
Merchant of Venice, Julius Caesar, right? But the one that really stands out, and it was actually, as I mentioned, like part of our examination as well, right? So we probably went through it a bit too thoroughly. So it was As You Like It by William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I really liked it for that matter. And the
We
main
all did.
reason is like, it was enjoyable in the sense that how he created the depth in those characters, right? And that
Yeah.
really stood out for me. So one of the more, what do you call it, the important like lines that stand out for me would be like, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, right? And so
Yeah.
whenever I try to write a poem or a story or anything related to my life or any experiences that I have, I try to go into the depth of character, right? And that's really how I like influence my thinking for that matter. And like he makes all the characters so like memorable, right? I mean, you remember Touchstone, right? So
Absolutely.
he used to do that with characters, right? He used to give them names regarding their like their style or some character flaw they had or some kind of a behavior they had, right? And really that stands out for me.
Since we're hovering over a topic of As You Like It and the characters it had, which was the one character which stood out for you in that entire play? One character which you really liked in
Yeah,
that
for
one
me,
play?
it has to be Touchstone because, like, so basically, what Touchstone is, in a sense, is like someone who is like a basis of comparison. Someone is going to judge and give you reference, or he's going to give you advice on what's working, what's recommending you, right?
Yeah.
And that's what that person used to do. So the character of Touchstone was someone who used to drink a lot. He used to be very moody, and he used to just pass out judgment to anyone he wanted to. So that really
Yeah,
works out.
he was a motley fool as described by
Yeah.
Shakespeare himself.
Absolutely. So Exhibit A, Touchstone, is for me the main character that stands out from As You Like It. And I think I think we can discuss this some other day, but if Shakespeare would have been here now, and
Yeah.
especially in the 80s or the 90s, right? I think it would have been interesting if he was part of the, right, the writer's bureau for Seinfeld. So the characters would have been really crazy back
I can totally imagine Jason Alexander, the person who played George Costanza
then. Yeah.
as Touchstone. And I can imagine, I also have a lot of things coming up in my mind for the one character that I love the most, Cosmo Kramer.
Right.
But as you said, we'll keep it for some other day, as you said,
Sure.
and as you like. So I'll just
All
wrap
right.
it up on that. That brings me to the next question. Do you like watching plays live? Have you done it so far? Have you watched it live on a stage, on the big canvas? Abhinav.
Oh, I do, Akashdeep, and I have seen live performances of The Merchant of Venice, which is a Shakespearean, back in school days. And then later on, I believe I've seen the importance of being earnest by Oscar Wilde. So this quintessential comedy of manners, rather, has always, retained its ability to tickle audiences for over 100 years. So that's something phenomenal for me. So these are two things which I've always seen and liked in theater.
Okay. What about you, Priyanka?
So yes, definitely. Since I started knowing about plays through watching them, so it was my first play, and I have a very great and very good memory about it. And so we in Assam we have this mobile theater groups who come on stage and perform live performances. So it has inculcated a very unique sense of entertainment in all of us as a child, and it has brought out a different sense of looking at how entertainment can be different from like watching your daily movies or something. So
Yeah.
yes, I really enjoy them watching live, and I hope to see more in future. And I think it's going to be quite difficult in coming days, but I
Mhm.
hope the essence is not lost for this place.
I surely hope so too, because I just hope and pray the essence is not lost. I like to stick on to this. Is there any anecdote or any incident you'd like to share with our viewers around which happened around you and while you're watching plays live? Anything you would like to share on that topic?
Yes, I would like to quote an example of the theater called Anuradha, so which I had
Mm-hmm.
watched back in my school days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it was actually my first time when I went to watch, so it was a bit of a surprise for me because as a child or as a teenager, you are so used to seeing on screen the movies and everything. So
Yeah.
when you first time watch a play, so you are
Mm-hmm.
taken aback, so you see live characters unfolding live. It's just one stage and the scenes change. So
Yeah.
I think that was quite a jolting effect on me, and
Mm.
it was a very unique experience, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that anecdote with our viewers. Uh, Anubhav, I'm tossing it to you. Any fond memories from Portfield back from early 2000?
I mean, yeah, these mobile ASMEs groups Priyanka
Yeah.
mentioned, right? So we
Yeah.
used to go to Courtfield a lot, in Jorhat
Yeah.
especially, to watch a
Yeah.
few of these. I mean, I was pretty young back then, so I don't remember exactly who was acting. So I think Jatin Bora was in one of them. I'm not
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly sure. but it was quite
Yeah.
fun. Like I remember the experience because it's just one stage, right? So they're just changing
Mhm.
the scenery here and there. And
Mhm.
I think like if I go back to like my school days, I think luckily for us, just before our board examinations, we actually got our hands on the movie version of As You Like It, right?
Yeah.
And we got to see the actual movie for ourselves because we had just read the text, right? We just know the characters. So it was great to put a face to those characters and see
Mhm.
how those scenes were acted out. So that was an amazing experience for me.
Yeah, I had watched it as well. I mean, I was one of my classmates had. I remember she had called me and she told me like, if you actually want to understand it really well,
Right.
watch this. And I did, and that really helped.
Yep.
A lot of fun memories of that one specific play from that one specific part of our school life.
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay. Over the past many decades, many plays have been adapted into movies, and they have, covered the journey from the pages to the 70 screen, from here, there to there, from page to celluloid. So, what will be? I just want to know what are your views on plays that have been adapted into movies so far. Abhinav, starting with you.
Fair question, Akashdeep. The words of Shakespeare almost, I believe, forms the backbone of any famous movie industry today. His plays were the origins of early cinema and has its various forms in contemporary cinema as well. Even
Yeah.
Bollywood, I would say here in India, is obsessed till an extent by Shakespeare. If you consider
Mm.
either Makbul or even, Omkara, a few more,
Yeah.
it is all of them were also enacted well and it had its due praise by the audience for maintaining synergy with the old man's lines basically. And
Absolutely.
I guess the most commonly used plot across film industries in the globe is either a ripoff or a twisted version of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, which is quite famous. You can
Yeah.
use the script in so many forms in different ways, and uh, which is quite epic and quite beautiful as well.
Even Romeo and Juliet, the way I see it, was a story that transcended generations and like geographies and everything. I
Exactly.
mean, you have Romeo and Juliet, you have Soni Mahiwal, Shiri Farhad, Laila Majnu, and it's the same old story. Like two rival families, two people falling in love, and Indian everybody dies.
It's beautiful.
That's how you describe a plot in a really bad way, and I just did that, and I just want to say sorry for that. Moving on, Priyanka, your views on this?
So firstly, thank you for this question, Akashdeep, and I'm really glad that you really bring out the difference and specific mention of movies because
Yeah.
plays are often adapted as theaters, and there prevails a confusion.
Hmm.
And coming to the answer your question, so I would say that there are some really good ones which are adapted, and one is of course Omkara, which was based on Othello by Shakespeare. So which was really good, and it really sets the benchmark. And so I'd like to give you a not so good example, which I watched was a play called Silence. The Court is in Session by Vijay Tendulkar. It's a Marathi play and it's a brilliant one. But the way it has been adapted, it's not so good because the essence of the play, when you read it or when you expect because the concept is known, right? So I
Yeah.
think that was lost somewhere. So I think it's a huge, the content is quite immense, and I think we are yet to explore more. And there are brilliant plays which are available in, like, in our Assamese literature, also in Bengali literature by Tagore. So which I think are losing the essence.
Anubhav, tossing it to you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of classics that have been adapted into movies, right? So, and the beauty of like every adaptation is how the director spins his own story on top of that, right? I mean, how he's alluding to the overall concept of the play and then using his own direction cues to get someone to enact it and portray the overall meaning behind it, right? And that's how it becomes enjoyable for the audience. And I think I remember like Heather quite vividly, and
Yeah.
it's like an adaptation of Shakespeare's Hamlet, right? And even though it was set in the insurgent hotbed of Kashmir, they could still, the underlying story of how Hamlet plays out was portrayed
Yeah.
quite well. And even though, like, I think I read about the fact that it was an adaptation, I think in the credits or after I came home watching the movie, right?
Okay.
So then, like, it tied the dots for me quite well. So it was quite amazing to experience that.
That was Vishal Bharadwaj's last film in his Shakespearean trilogy, Makbul, Omkara, and Heather. And Heather is one of my personal favorites, one of the best films I've seen in the last half a decade. Yeah. Okay, so since we're hovering over the topic of plays being adapted into movies, what is the one particular thing that you look out for when you watch a play which has been adapted into a movie? One aspect. Abhinav.
Yeah, and I believe the right connection of the actor towards the main theme of the play, that's very critical. Most of the famous plays have characters which have lived for over centuries, and enacting such a plot is extremely difficult. So, if an actor does his due diligence, it's always
Hmm.
a pleasure for the viewers. And I believe it was incredible to see, Saif Ali Khan portraying Diego in Omkara, which was a subtle, depiction of Othello. So it was perfect. I believe nobody could have done a villain better. I mean, in Indian cinema, I think one of the true characters which he brought out, and after that, you know, he almost overshadowed a hero itself. So I would believe
Yeah.
the connection with the Shakespearean play was perfect. I would say Othello was completely well shown in a different atmosphere, different time zone, different culture. So it was great.
I clearly remember when Omkara was released, Saif had totally stolen the show with that portrayal. He was also awarded a national award for that, if I'm not mistaken, because he got a lot of awards for that one character. Langra Tyagi was the character that stayed back after the movie, and if very correctly pointed it out, he actually managed to overshadow the bad guy. Actually managed to overshadow everything else, and uh, and that is very rare in movies,
Very, very.
be it Hollywood, be it Bollywood, be it across the globe.
Yeah,
It's very rare when the bad guy overshadows the good guy,
totally.
and when it happens, it's really good. I enjoy it personally. Priyanka, the one aspect to look out for when you watch a play which has been adapted for the celluloid for the 70th.
So clearly, it is the characterization. I think somewhere it has a connect with what Abhinav already said. So
Yeah.
pragmatically, the play would be a known concept for many, as I said, and
Yeah.
unknown for few, or the vice versa. But what sets it apart is the characterization of the role play. And
Hmm.
I think I would again quote the same example of Diego's character played by Saif Ali Khan. And
Yeah.
when I watched it, and I have watched it, I think some 27 times, Omkara.
Okay.
And I would really appreciate that I know Saif Ali Khan only through that movie, I think. And there was some song he played, some Ole Ole song, yeah. And he has left that kind of an impression. So I think characterization is something to look after.
Okay. The song which you mentioned is was from the 90s and this is from early 2000s. So there's a gap of almost a decade between these two things that you
that
mentioned.
that's that's the that's the catch there.
Yeah, that's okay. And I caught it. I'm glad. Okay. And Anubhav, the question remains the same.
Right. So I'll give you one word for this. So that's soliloquy. So that's basically a monologue or a conversation that a character has out loud with himself, right? And Shakespeare's plays were peppered with such monologues. And if the movie adaptation of it can really pull this off, because in a way you are telling the audience, like the character himself is telling the audience how he's thinking, what his thoughts are, how he's deliberating a decision, right? And that's really important. So if someone can portray that well, I think I'm quite sold. Like I'll watch that movie again just for that sake, right? It's very hard to pull it off because to make it look natural and authentic and not to make it cringy, because they do end up becoming cringy if they make it forced. So that's an important point. And I think like it's never easy to like translate something that's in the classical textual version and bring it onto the movie, the visual version. And also like when most of the plays that we read, like the classical ones, they're set in the medieval or the Victorian era, right? And it's very hard to bring it into context to today's world and make it resonate with the audience. So if they are able to do that, that's quite amazing. And mostly like I think for people who don't watch plays that much or don't know much about William Shakespeare, I think a great example for them would be Manto, right? The movie. So the movie was quite a hit because how they used the story of his entire life and the stories that he wrote himself, and how they collaborated that together to perform that narrative, right? With all those surreal highs and the extreme lows in the movie. I think that really stood out. And it's all about the final execution, right? If they can do it, if they can do justice to the original adaptation or the idea that they're working with, I think that's a match made in heaven.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective with us. And the conclusion, here we arrive at the conclusion, the last question of this discussion. It's the cliched question with which I tend to end all my discussions. I just want the viewers to get an overview. What are you currently reading, Abhinav?
Currently I'm stuck with this one for this week. It's a brilliant tale, what a tale, I would say. Iskender Pala's Barbarossa. So it's translated to English from Turkish by Alexander Daw, and this book is again historical fiction, which recently I wrote something which to look forward to. And basically it's about the Ottoman Turks and their naval warfare, and it's completely special because Iskender Pala, as a Turkish novelist as well as a professor, has done due diligence to, I think, historical fiction as well. So it's a big thing for me and a great mention as well. So that's me.
Okay. Priyanka, what are you reading currently?
So since we're talking about plays, so I would like to mention one of the plays that I recently completed reading was Antigone by Sophocles. So it was also part of my graduation. So I just went to, to just go through and go by the acts and the scenes. So it was quite a nostalgic experience. But I took a break from it and I immediately jumped into The Cauldron of Hope by Mr. Abhinav Bhattacharya, and I think it's a great book so far. I have just been reading a few chapters of it, and I'm really liking it because of the way of the story, the storytelling. So it's
I'm doing the same.
what I'm currently reading. Oh, okay.
I'm doing the same as well.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And Anubhav, the final words.
Well, currently, like I am reading up a bit on copywriting and business mindset, so that won't be light read for the weekend for sure. But like in terms of like if I could recommend something here, I would. So if someone's looking for fantasy fiction, I would go for The Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. If someone's looking for just basic fiction, like I think Gabriel Garcia Marquez does a great job any time of the day. Again, if anyone is looking for historical fiction, we have Abhinav's book that's just recently out, right? So it's quite interesting. Like it's going to take you through quite a narrative and quite a tale. So you can try that out. And if anyone's looking for non-fiction, I think they can try Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that list with us. And that brings us to the end of this discussion this weekend. Thank you so much, Abhinav, Priyanka, and Anubhav for joining me on Powerplay. Thank you so much. Have a great night ahead. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You too.
See you.
Stay safe. Take care.